My name is Everton, and I manage the design critique program that is operated out of OCAD-U. The design critique program matches or partners designers with startup companies. So we work with startups from across Canada. We work with a variety of designers. We work with industrial designers, UX designers, service designers, and a lot of them are alumni of OCAD University, but not all of them. Over the last 7 years, we've worked with over 250 companies. So we work with approximately 40 companies a year. And I'm going to share with you some of the things that we've learned during that time over the last 7 years. And one of the key things that I want to share with you today is that through those experiences, what we've learned is that we're not designing products. We're designing emotions. So a misconception that we have, or sometimes the startups that we work with have, is that it's about redesigning the UX, right? That's something that they want to do. They want to try and find ways to create a new feature that they're going to add to the product or service. And a lot of times they get caught up in that, and they're not paying attention to what we think is really important. And what we've seen over those 250 companies, that it's really about conversations that help us to understand that emotional journey of the users. So if we can move away from some of those tactical design considerations, that's where we actually add a lot of value in those design critiques. So on the negative side, some of those emotions, if you're thinking about what a user might experience, they might experience frustration, right? That might be something that they experience. They might experience a lack of connectedness to the experience. But on the positive side, if we can design these experiences well, they can feel connected, they can feel reinforced, right? They can feel like they are actually understood as they go through the experience. So that's what we want to do. We want to try and find those moments. We want to try and understand how we can affect those experiences for the positive. And what we've seen, and what we've, through literature reviews, through our own experience, is that there's lots of different predictors of behavior for consumers as they're going to buy or they're going to purchase. And there's things that we could refer to as technical, like, do you actually have this feature? Do you have this ability? So that's one thing. Another thing is what we refer to as like organizational factors. So do you have the processes that allow them to do the things they need to do? But then there's two others that we want to think a little bit more about, and we want to be able to talk about and articulate as we have the design critique. One of them is motivation. Do we understand the motivation of those users? Do we also understand the social factors? Those are things that are going to be important in terms of making decisions. So these things, these factors here are now touching on those emotional pieces, trying to understand what's actually going to move someone to make a purchase, to trust a product or service experience. So to do that, we need to start to talk about qualities. So that's what we need to focus on. We need to focus on the qualities. And that's something that designers are great at, right? We're able to talk about these things. We're able to articulate. We're able to have these types of conversations. So a couple things that we might want to talk about is engagement, right? Flow, authenticity, transparency, all those things. We might want to be able to talk about trust. That's something else that as a designer we're able to articulate, we're able to talk about, we're able to actually have the words to work with an organization to say, hey, these are the things that we need to start to build that will reinforce trust in that experience. So that's what we want to focus on, and that's what we've been focusing on, and that's where we've seen the value, having those types of conversation about the qualities. So coming over here, OCAD-U, what we've seen through our time, through our experience working all of these companies, is that's where the real value is. Diving deep on that emotion and understanding how we can affect those experiences. I'm going to give you a case study. So one of the companies that we worked with was an online retailer, and they were delivering garden products. So they came to us and they said, hey, we've got this problem with our boxes. We think that we've got something that we need to deal with that's going to really help drive revenue for our organization. They also said, we also are having some trouble with our online checkout experience. Is it possible for you and the team to work with us to actually optimize that experience? And what we did is we started to have those conversations with the company to say, what's going on? What's happening? And what we noticed is that there was a mismatch in expectations. So they weren't shipping plants. What they were actually shipping was trust. What we learned is that a beginner gardener, a lot of their users were beginner gardeners. They actually have a journey that looks like this. So there's a lot of things that happen before the boxing experience that they were very focused on. So they need to make sure that they could understand that those potential purchasers were very much anticipating what was going to happen. They were building hope around what they would get delivered to them. So there's these things up above before the unboxing experience that were very important. So what we need to do is understand how can we help those users, how can we help those customers go through that journey. And the box and the delivery was one part of that. And then if we did a good job, then what would happen is that they would trust that experience and they would continue to be engaged and come back and come back and come back. So yes, we spent a lot of time, our industrial designer and our team spent a lot of time thinking about, okay, how can we improve that box? But as well, we had to talk about expectations, setting the right expectations through the journey, things that we could do with messaging, communication, content, all of those types of things. So as we did that, we needed to get deeper into the human-centered lens, right? And that's really what we want to focus on when we do these design critiques. We want to focus on the human. The last talk, there was a phrase that she used, and she said, deeply human. When people got into the room and they'd start to have those conversations, there was these connections. And then in the last part, she even said, relate, relate, relate. That's really important. And that's what we've seen. For organizations, they need to be able to relate to that service. They need to be able to relate to that company. So that's what we want to do. We want to try and ask the type of questions that will help us deepen that relationship. So, in the old world, we might have been very focused on, okay, how can we change the box, right? Very, very much focused on the tactics of it. But in the new human-centered perspective, the lens that I'm suggesting that we need to take is that you want to focus on how can we build trust, right? How do we understand where their frustrations are? How do we understand those human aspects of that individual, that person, so that we can help them as they go through that experience? So we've got to shift the questions that we're asking a little bit. We're getting to the same solutions and answers, but we need to start from a different point to help us to really deliver the value that's important. So that's what I'm suggesting, is that we need to take that human-centered lens as we design, because it's not about the product, right? It's about the emotions that they're going through. That's what's really going to lead to engagement, to trust, and then to success. And, if you do a good job, it's going to be what we've seen when we've done this, and, we have some good results, is that, okay, this is changing the way that they're thinking. It's not just about what they do, but it's actually how they think about the work. And then if they can think in a different way, they can come to new solutions, and they can deliver even higher value. So, human-centered, that's what we want to be. That's what we want to push towards. We want to give clarity, right, around that experience if we can. And we want to give confidence. So these are the things that we want to push to, and we want to make sure that we're asking the right questions so that we can get there. And the last part there is just feeling understood. That's really important. And so why is this a challenge? Because we work in complicated systems, right? We work in complicated systems all the time, and when you're inside a system, it's hard to see the complexity of a system. You normalize things when you're in that complex environment. Some of the things that you normalize. So you normalize friction. So creating unnecessary steps, because from inside the system or from an internal perspective, it seems fine. But if you step out, and if you can get to that external perspective, then you can start to see that this is unnecessary. We can change these flows. We can do things differently. Something else that we also sometimes do is we very much focus on just that connectedness. Like, we're feeling disconnected when we're inside the system because we're not close enough. We're not close enough to the user. We're not close enough to that customer to actually understand what they need. And then the last piece here is what we talk about is just being overly complex. We don't want to be overly complex if we don't need to be. So we need to step back. Step back. If we can step back, we can then see that bigger picture. We can see that system, and we can understand where those complexities are, and then we can start to design with that understanding of the user in mind. So some of the things that we talk about here is that if we can really ask those emotional questions, that's important. So can we actually start to ask those questions, frame our questions a bit different, get deeper in terms of those motivations? And if we can understand those motivations, then we can start to do things differently, and we can design systems that are better. All right, and in addition to that, we need to start measuring things that are important for us to understand about their experience. So these are some of the things that we need to do, but overall, if you look at this list, the main thing is that we need to step back. Step back, see the system, understand the emotional journey, and then be able to design with that understanding in mind. So that's what we've learned, right? 250 companies. We've been doing this since 2019, and that's the takeaway, is this, that it's not about the tactical changes in the UX or UI. It's about that deeper understanding about expectations, emotions, and what customers are feeling. So let's ask those questions, let's get deeper, and then we're going to be able to design better solutions. So when we talk about impact, right, it starts with really getting to that human-centered understanding to be able to drive towards impact and change. So thank you very much. That's what I wanted to cover for today. I appreciate your time.